Hi. So in this video, we're going to talk about the writing process and those stages to get you to the point of starting to write your essay. So I've linked here to our ebook, and this section is just a very short part that just gets us into that chapter 2. So this just kind of gives us an overview that admits to the part that writing is a struggle. It's not easy, but the goal is to let your readers think that it's easy, right? We don't want our readers to see an end product that reflects the frustration, the struggle, right? We want this kind of seamless, very well produced piece of writing that, looks like it's effortless and easy, right? But it isn't. Right? I don't care how long you've been writing, how much you like to write, how good you are at writing. Writing is a frustrating, difficult process. There are some things that get easier. I've been teaching writing for 31 years. I've been writing for longer than that. There are some things that I don't struggle with anymore, right? Grammar, mechanics, I don't make a whole lot of mistakes because I've just been doing it for so long. The rules are just second nature to me. So there are some things that I just do automatically because I just know. It's like tying your shoe, right? We all tie our shoes and we don't even stop and think about the process. But at one point, tying our shoes, that was really difficult, right? But now we just do it. So grammar and mechanics is something that you just learn and then you just don't think about it for the most part, right? So that part of the writing process for me is pretty easy. But boy, there are a lot of other things about the writing process at certain times that aren't. So sometimes I'll get a writing assignment and I just dive right in and all the ideas are flowing and everything just works great. And other times I'll get a writing assignment and it's not going well. It's not something that maybe I want to do. I've been assigned to write a report or something and it's maybe not an area that I like or enjoy. And so I'm not necessarily really interested in it, but I've got to do it. And so for me personally, if I have an interest in it, that always makes such a difference. I think that's probably true for a lot of people. If I have some kind of reason to do it, then that always helps me get it done better. But I can't promise you that it's going to be easy. But like I've highlighted here on the page there, you can see that it can be easier if you learn some strategies. And the writing process is just a strategy that has been developed over centuries of, yeah, maybe even millennia. Actually, technically, I would say probably this goes back to the Greeks of the 5th century BC. So yeah, a couple of millennia here that we've been breaking down this communication process and rhetoric into these stages. And not every person is going to do it in exactly the same way, and your book tells you that, right? It doesn't really reflect the way people write. We write in fits and starts. The stages overlap, and sometimes we're doing these things simultaneously, especially at the beginning when we're looking at, how are we developing ideas and getting started. Sometimes I'm doing several of those things at once. That's just the way our brains work. I will say this many times in the videos as we're going along. Writing is messy. It's not a clearly delineated process, but we can see different steps. And sometimes, again, we're doing these things maybe almost at the same time. Sometimes we can separate them and do them distinctly. Sometimes we want to do them distinctly at sometimes. Sometimes it's going so fast that they're just, coming on to each other so quickly that they're really almost happening at the same time. Here in red, and I'm trying to do this, like if you see anything here that I've highlighted in red, that means it's like really important. A lot of times I'll use green to highlight maybe a secondary idea. Yellow is just general things that I'm pointing out. This is to help me as I'm doing those lectures to kind of get the main ideas here. But again, this writing process, these are the choices that help us get through the composition process. And they can help you that the more you write, the better you'll get, right? That's just the end result, right? And with this caveat, right? If you keep doing these things, yes, you can get better. But if you don't listen to me and you just keep making the same mistakes over and over again, you're not going to get better. But if you turn your work in and you listen to my advice and you make those changes when I tell you to make changes, then you're going to get better, right? That's the key, right? That you've got to listen to someone who is an expert in this particular field, right? There are some fields, like if you're going to be a creative writer, that, yeah, you might be writing in a way that is inventing a new way of doing something, right? Maybe, people aren't ready for that, so you might not get well accepted. I mean, my niece and I were talking about J.K. Rowling yesterday and how Harry Potter was rejected by dozens of publishers. Can you imagine the people that kicked themselves once it became so huge, right? Sometimes people don't recognize genius, right? Sometimes a book just, people aren't ready for it. But college writing or professional writing, there are certain standards. I know what other teachers are going to be looking for the most part. So that's what I base my feedback on. I'm basing my feedback what I know academic writing is looking for. So when I give a criticism, when I give a suggestion, it's based on that knowledge that I've accumulated not only from 31 years of teaching, but also my own professional experience as an academic writer. And so that's how we get better, especially when we're looking at trying to perform for a very specific occasion. And we'll talk about occasion here in one of the little sections in the future here for this section video. And that's why, again, you should listen to your teacher, because that's why you're taking this class, right? Okay, so let's go to that next section, which is chapter 2 on invention. So invention that's a Greek term from, like I said, the Greeks kind of invented rhetoric. And rhetoric is just the word meaning the art of communication. And when the Greeks invented it back in the 5th century, and by inventing it, I mean they invented it as a formal study, right? It's not they invented communication, but they actually started writing down rules. And it was oral communication at first because writing was an expensive thing to do, right? The materials to write were not easily available and they were expensive. You didn't have a high rate of literacy, so not very many people wrote. So it was much more common to communicate orally, right? And eventually, though, these ideas in terms of how we communicate orally were then applied to writing. And it wasn't until the Middle Ages that written and oral communication separated into such distinct fields. The story is that writers and orators had an argument about which was the superior form of communication, and they couldn't agree, so they decided to split into two different disciplines. So that's why speech and composition are two different classes and two different fields now. But when you take speech, if you haven't taken speech already, you'll note that there are a lot of similarities in terms of how to put together a speech. One of my best friends is a retired speech teacher, and we always talk about how we could go in and teach each other's classes up to a certain point without much study, because there's so much overlap. So rhetoric is just the art of communication, both, so you have oral communication, written communication, and so invention is that part, and it comes early. But invention is something that you can do at any stage of the writing process, but we definitely start the writing process, right? So again, a process is just a series of steps, right? If we have a task, we break it down into a set of steps to do it, right? Like a recipe is a process, changing your oil is a process, right? So that's what writing is. We break it down into steps, right? So invention, sometimes called pre-writing, is that place at the beginning where we're trying to be inspired, right? We're coming up with ideas to write about. And sometimes when we get a writing prompt, we may have an idea right off the bat. That doesn't mean, though, that we should skip the invention process, because sometimes we might have an idea, but we need to refine it. We need to get as many thoughts about that idea on paper. Also, sometimes we have an idea, but once we start actually kind of really thinking about it, we may find that that idea doesn't really suit the assignment the way we thought it would. And if we don't take time at this stage in the invention process to really kind of explore the idea to see exactly how well it suits, we may find ourselves writing that essay draft and halfway through it's like, oops, we hit a wall. And if we would have just spent some time in the invention stage doing some work, we would have discovered maybe a real big flaw in the topic for that particular writing assignment, right? So, like your book here says, that this is oftentimes the most neglected part. People like to, they get an idea and they just jump right in drafting. And again, it doesn't take a lot of time to do the invention process. It can take, I mean, you can just do all sorts of techniques, but it doesn't necessarily take a lot of time. You might spend an hour doing this, but it can reap a lot of rewards. So don't skip it. All right, so again, it helps you discover what interests you and helps you develop ideas for your essay, right? And your book here tells you that before you really dive into something, you need to make sure that you're understanding your essay assignment and the limits of it, right? And you should think about what you want to say.